All right, lesson 4. The fourth Yama is Brahmacharya. Now, if you read the handout, it looks like it is only about sexuality. That is not true. I wrote this 27 years ago when I started teaching the course in a structured way. I haven't. The files have been edited, but never really updated. But in the years since then, of course, my insights have evolved enormously. And that's what you will find in the classes. You read in the first sentence that Brahma means harmony. But harmony is something that is directly linked with Brahma, but Brahma does not mean harmony, it means God. And an alternative word for the ground chakra is the cavity or the abode of God. So now we have to talk about what God is. But first and foremost, I will also explain where it comes from, that Brahmacharya is widely around the world interpreted as control of your sexuality. Not only in yoga, but in all religions and philosophies. I'll explain why, based on historical perspective. Brahma means God. Acharya means living the life of, or devoting your life to, or walking the path of. International Yoga Federation, when I had my yoga studio in Itaewon, based on my achievements, they gave me the title of Yogacharya, which literally means a person who walks the path of yoga, dedicated to yoga. Because they realized how deep I teach, how genuine I teach, not the modern kind of yoga, but yoga as it was developed throughout tens of thousands of years of history. And I guess I don't have much with titles. My name is Ron, and I'm your friend, not your teacher. But I guess I am one who's walking the path of yoga, technically, because that is what my life is about. I live and breathe yoga. I am yoga, yoga is me. It just naturally grew that way. Brahmacharya literally means walking the path of the divine. And that means not some entity, worshipping some entity or a statue or a concept. It's really about following the path of the crown chakra. That means that you need to work to fuel the crown chakra, which you do with your yoga practice, asana and meditation. But also that you read the scriptures that give you very deep insight into how intricate the human mind is and how you can serve people, help people based on those insights, live better lives, improve their lives, spread civilization among the ancient people. That's where it started. So Brahmacharya is a holy woman or holy man, fulfilling that function in the society. Every ancient community had such person, usually in combination with being a medicine man or woman. Those people were also considered as seers, which is a function of the crown chakra. People would go to them for advice and insight into their destiny, their future. Surrounded by mystery, of course, but every society in the past had a person that was a Brahmacharya fulfilling the spiritual functions and medical needs for people based on natural medicine. How did it end up becoming focused on sexuality? That is because you can still see today in underdeveloped countries, sexual violence is rampant. In the past we were not aware of that, but you see more and more in the news what horrible sex crimes are taking place. Rampant. It's also in the developed world it's taking place, but on a much smaller scale. So ancient teachers recognized that the biggest problem society is facing is lack of control of their sexuality. It led to violence. And if you look at it from our point of view, uncontrolled sexuality, instinctive sexuality, like animals have sex, leads to the violation of all previous yamas. It's violence, it's a lie, and it's theft. Taking something without permission, which very often happens with sexual relationships, is theft, it's violence. So what ancient communities want is harmony. Not only on a personal level, but on a societal level. Because societies where there is no harmony fall apart, do not develop, cannot take care of themselves. You can see that in the world around us still today. When there is harmony, things start to prosper. People start to unify, work together, because there is trust. And so economically, societies start to prosper as a result of that. So ancient people saw this as a crucial issue. In the same vein, you can see, you know in India, cows are holy. Have you ever asked yourself why? There's a very practical reason. In times of famine, when the harvest failed, farmers would slaughter their cow. They had nothing to eat, they would slaughter their cow. Then the next morning they would wake up and scratch their head, and who's gonna pull my plow now? Who's gonna pull my cart now? In an impulse they slaughtered their cow because they were hungry. Horribly maybe, starving. The whole family was starving. But that cow is the engine behind the economy, behind the farm, behind their existence. So when the government says, don't slaughter your cow because you need it, then people say, yeah, but I'm hungry. But if the government says to uneducated people, illiterate people, your cow is a holy entity, it's sacred, you can't kill it. If you do so, you go to prison, or you go to hell, or in any case, they instilled fear into people, not to have society break apart, fall apart, as a result of farmers slaughtering all their cows in those years that nature destroyed the harvest. So it's practical. Why do Muslims think that pigs are impure, unclean? If you think in the same vein, you will understand. Pigs are not impure or unclean, any more or less than a goat or a horse or a cow. So why? That is because goats, sheep, cows, horses, they eat food that we don't eat. They eat grass, they eat leaves, but they eat food that we don't eat. What do pigs eat? Potatoes. They dig into the ground, they eat potatoes, they eat carrots, they eat roots, they eat food that we eat. So they are our competitors. Now these days we go to the supermarket, everything is there. Pigs are no competitors anymore. But in ancient times, when food was scarce, we didn't want pigs to eat our food, or at least in the Middle East, in Muslim countries, so they declared them unholy. Still today, it's a sin for a Muslim to eat pork. And they really think that it's unclean and will affect them in a very negative way. No, it's very practical. In Europe, I grew up in Europe, you too. You grew up, as a child, you grew up with stories that wolves are evil. Why? They're just big dogs, a little bit wilder than dogs. They're not domesticated, but they are in fact dogs. So actually, in Europe, still in this age, you grow up with fairy tales of wolves being evil and needing to be killed. So you become a potential wolf killer when you are an adult. Why? Because they eat our livestock. When they're roaming around at night and they come across a farm, they will kill a sheep or a bunch of chickens. And so we needed to get rid of them. And we eradicated them from Europe for decades. They're coming back now. And because all the people that are now alive have been raised with the fear of wolves, there's a lot of protest in society. But there's also nature conservation organizations that want to restore nature. They also see the role of the wolf in nature. They want wolves to come back. And I've shared on Facebook an article about what happened in Yellowstone when they reintroduced wolves. It totally changed the environment enormously, because they killed animals that ate all the vegetation. So vegetation came back. As a result of the vegetation coming back, many species of birds that had not existed there for a long time came back. The beaver started dams again. Enormous. The ecosystem completely changed as a result of the wolves coming back. We took them out because they ate our livestock, and we basically destroyed the environment as a result of that. So that is what holy means. I hope you understand when people talk about holy things, that there is a practical meaning behind it. There is nothing holy. What is holy is your crown chakra. What is God? God is your crown chakra. It's the location of where your higher characteristics are located. Wisdom, intuition, deep insight. Unconditional love originates in the crown chakra and manifests through the heart. So there's no conflict there. It manifests through the heart. So when we talk about God, if you talk about God to a fanatic or a devout Christian or any other religious person, they tend to feel insulted. They not agree with you, because their idea still is that there is somebody up there on the cloud that watches over you and that you have to respect and worship and so on, but lacking the sophistication of deep insight of how it all started in ancient times and what the purpose of it was. Another anecdote is Moses went up to the mountain, Ararat, I think it was called, because he was desperate. The 10 Commandments, you know the story of the 10 Commandments? Moses was leading his people out of Egypt, out of slavery, out of Egypt, into the desert, looking for a place to settle, the promised land. So he was the leader of thousands of people. with their families and their livestock and all their belongings, going through the desert. And people are people, with their desires and their emotions and their instincts. So there was lots of crime. There was lots of violence. And it drove him crazy. He had to keep them together. They had to function as a unity, as a unit, to find the place they were looking for and to survive, really. So he scratched his head and he said, we need to do something about it, but how? If I'm going to tell them they need to behave, they will not listen to me. They don't respect me as such. So he said, I will go up to the mountain. You stay put in your camp. I go up to the mountain and I will communicate with God. He went up to the mountain. The story goes he went there fasting, and he went up to the mountain. And he came up with the 10 Commandments. According to the story, he had chiseled them out on stone tablets. Whichever way, whichever form he brought those commandments to the people, he came down the mountain and he said, he didn't say, these are my laws and I want you to live by them, because he knew that wouldn't work. He said, look, I spent 40 days on that mountain meditating and fasting, communicating with God, and these are God's words. This is God's will. Not mine, God's will. And you must abide by them. You must obey these laws, because they are God's laws. And that is how he tried to... So if you read the story, it seems unrealistic, unreal, but this is how it works. Same story as with the cows and the pigs and the wolves. It's leaders who try to do something that is credible to people and basically based on instilling fear in people. So that's what God really means. God was created to harmonize society, to bring society together so that you can survive, so that you can thrive. And if you understand the crown chakra, you can see that there is some divinity in it, but it's nothing special. Everybody possesses it. We all have a cavity of Brahma. But not many people have access to it because there is no fuel. All the fuel is down in the lower chakras, where the lower emotions and desires are located. And there's no fuel in the crown chakra to allow all those wonderful human characteristics to manifest that we potentially possess. So that is where yoga comes in. But not only yoga, all spiritual practices are designed, including martial arts, by the way. Traditional martial arts are designed to bring energy up to the crown chakra. That is why still in Korea, martial art teachers are very highly respected. It's fading away, but still, because of that. Because a real traditional martial arts teacher is somebody of higher moral principles. So all these systems are designed for the same purpose. And the same that monks do in the monasteries and in the temples, the Buddhist and the Christian, Catholic monasteries, is all for the same purpose. To bring energy to the crown chakra through control. And it leads to civilization. The world that has been created, that we now live in, that has evolved so rapidly over the past couple of thousand years, is the result of that. I read a position a couple of years ago about the Industrial Revolution. The world has been, developing upwards, but very slowly, until the Industrial Revolution, and bang, the development suddenly exploded. And it started in England. And the story goes, the theory was presented that the turning point came when the tea and coffee houses were established. But in the past, in Europe and also in Korea, makgeolli, we would drink low alcohol drinks because water was dangerous to drink. It could cause disease because of the bacteria, because of pollution. So water always needed to be cooked. That's why still Korean people cook boricha. You take water, you add some barley, and you have boricha. But that's not to make boricha, it's to decontaminate the water. And you might as well give it a little flavor in the process. In Europe, they created what is called table beer and table wine. If you go to Belgium or France, it still exists. Table beer and table wine are low alcoholic drinks. And people would drink that all day. And it made their brain mushy and lethargic. But now they brought from the East, from Africa and from the East, from Indonesia, Philippines and what have you, India, they started bringing in loads of tea. That's where the tea culture comes from. So instead of brewing alcohol, they started brewing tea and coffee. And that had two major effects. Not drinking alcohol anymore left the brain much fresher and clearer. But also, caffeine is stimulating. Now, in spiritual circles, drinking coffee is a no-no. You have to drink non-caffeinated drinks. This is not true. Caffeine is a very strong promoter of energy. And coffee can lead to restlessness. It can. But if you drink it in measured amounts, it leads to spiritual development. So instead of hanging around as they did, drinking beer, low alcohol beer and wine all day instead of water, parts of society more and more started drinking tea and coffee, and it led to great ideas and innovation, leading to the Industrial Revolution that then spread from England slowly to the rest of the world. It's so interesting. Anyway, Brahmacharya. Anybody can be a Brahmacharya. If you listen to your heart, follow your heart as much as you can. If you start reflecting on the yamas and later the niyamas, next week we will start with the niyamas, the moral principles and precepts, you're already a Brahmacharya. You practice yoga, leading to energy rising up, expanding and rising up, fueling the crown chakra. Look, it doesn't matter how much time you devote, and there is no measurement or there are no rewards given for how much of a Brahmacharya you are. But when you're on the path of yoga, in my opinion, you're already a Yogacharya or a Brahmacharya. And it will evolve over time and integrate more and more into your daily life. It's nothing special, it's human. It requires discipline. That is what distinguishes people from not being on that path or being on that path. It's a choice, and a choice that comes with a certain discipline to dedicate at least some time and effort to it. In religious circles, Brahmacharya is presented as celibacy. This is an important point. And what's wrong with celibacy, which is a vow of abstaining from sex. What is wrong with that is that sexuality is one of the strongest instincts in a human being. Not only in humans, also in animals. It's what ensures the existence of the species. It's what leads to procreation. We have as civilized human beings, we have turned it into romance and eroticism, but it starts as a basic instinct to procreate, to make sure that your species doesn't die out. Now, religious clergy people need to make a vow of celibacy, they are forced to deny one of their strongest instincts. And what happens? They get in trouble. Because there is now an internal conflict. They want to be a holy person, but now they feel they have certain needs that they are not allowed to fulfill. And that is why in the past 30 years, there have been so many scandals about sexual abuse in religious institutions all around the world. Also in yoga. Also in yoga sects and yoga communities, there are lots of abuse. So celibacy is really, in England they approach this in a very mature way, because there people are allowed to marry even while they are clergy. I think it's an Anglo-Saxon church or something. And that just seems a sensible thing to do or to allow. The purpose of a clergy person in the first place is to serve the people. And if you are not even allowed to have your own relationships and family, how can you advise the people that you serve, whose most problems are related to relationships and raising children? And you have no experience and you have to give them advice based on a book. So often not very practical. So we still live in a world with lots of sexual abuse, violence. People take what they want. It's often men that perpetrate it. Because that's just how nature is structured. In the animal world also, male animals always take the initiative, driven by instinct, which manifests as a desire. But there are also scandals of women abusing their position. That is not so important actually, because there's also a difference in the amount of violence or pressure that is being used, but apart from that. When it comes to sexuality, sexuality is from the lowest instinct, but it can actually lead to spiritual development if it is totally mutual. If it is totally mutual, without any coercion or lies or theft or violence, it becomes a union between two people that leads to sattva. So, as a woman, never participate in sexual activities from now on in which you feel something is not right. And men can be very persuasive, especially men that suffer from toxic masculinity. We will come back to that later in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. It's mentioned there. And I will explain a little bit more about what that means exactly. But that's just a male characteristic. Not only in the human world, but in the animal world too. Domination, wanting to dominate, wanting to control. Yoga leads to the elimination of toxic masculinity. It is my conviction that men need yoga more than women. And yet, you see more women in yoga. There are even studios where men are not allowed in Korea. The previous studio around the corner where I had my classes first, in 2020, was only exclusively for women. This Wonjangnim is more mature and everybody's welcome here. She's really nice. But I think that is how yoga started also. It was a man affair. And these days it's a fashion product that appeals especially to women, but I'm convinced men can benefit a lot from it in many ways. Yeah. All right. I think when it comes to sexuality, women have a more subtle way of using sexuality to get what they want, to achieve certain goals. And men have more forcible ways. It's just said that it has to lead to violence. I know people who have been subjected to sexual violence that has just destroyed them for the rest of their lives. It's just really tragic. So Brahmacharya, I told you a whole other story that actually doesn't have much to do with sexuality, but it is that sexual instinct. There's one of the strongest instincts that we possess that pulls energy down away from the crown chakra. And it is because of that, is my estimate, my guess, that the subject of Brahmacharya is mainly focusing on the issue of sexuality and trying to canalize that. And we have reached a point of civilization where we actually can use it in ways that it can promote spirituality. You know the book Kama Sutra? Kama means desire, and Sutra means holy scripture. So holy scripture about desire, yeah, because if you approach it consciously, it can lead to, it's yoga. It can lead to union and awakening of the crown chakra. But it has to be conform the yamas and the niyamas. It has to be without violence, without lies, without manipulation, coercion. And the Kama Sutra, you know, in the past, most people have heard of Kama Sutra, and then when I bring up the subject and twinkles in people's eyes, naughty, people think it's a book about sex, but it's not. It's a yoga book. And the old Kama Sutra, the original Kama Sutra, doesn't have illustrations, like the erotic illustrations that you see in modern versions of the Kama Sutra. It's a treatise, it's a description of how energy can be used. Energy, strong energy from the lowest instincts in human being can be utilized for spiritual purpose. Not on your own, together with somebody. And how wonderful is that? That is where the real marriage is not in the city hall, it's not in the church, it's in the soul. Two souls melting together, two hearts melting together. That is the ideal. Not easy to find, of course, but that is the ideal. Very powerful. All right. Questions? Yes, Haley.
What is the yoga philosophy on same-sex sexuality, like different alternative forms of sexual desire and attraction? And is there anything written about it? Like
not that I know of. Not that I know of.
The same philosophy just applies in the union of two souls coming together, and it's okay for it to be someone of the same sex?
Yeah, totally. The people who do not agree with same-sex relationships are people who are afraid. They're stuck in the past. They're afraid of change. They're afraid of things not being conform old traditions. They live in a tiny little box mentally. Yoga is about freedom, liberation, whatever that means for you. So, if that means you want to eat a peanut butter sandwich every day, and that feels like spiritually stimulating, then you do that. And if you feel love towards a person, regardless of gender, culture, race, age, And it feels right, and it feels good. That's yoga. What is not yoga is to think in between certain limited lines and say, oh no, that's not appropriate, or that's not how it's supposed to be. Look at the arguments. If you follow the news a little bit, once in a while it flares up. In America, for example, you have these very fanatic conservatives. They're against everything modern. They're against abortion, women's rights, freedom of choice, also against same-sex marriages and same-sex relationships, because it was written in a book. They have no own opinion about it whatsoever. The question is, how would they react if their own child would end up feeling attracted to a same-sex person? It's a very uncomfortable question that they don't want to face. So ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. Just follow your heart and go from there. Wherever it leads you. It's what brought me to Korea. It's what made me adopt two very needy dogs, even though I vowed, my previous dog died in the summer of 2018, and I vowed never to have a dog anymore. For two reasons. It was very painful to lose her. It was my baby, but also it's a restriction. It restricted me. Can't travel with the dog. But my life was not the same anymore. And 6 months later, there was a dog in the park that was being hunted by the fire brigade, the police, and I rescued that dog. And so when he settled down, I found his sister in a shelter, and I reunited them, and they're so happy and healthy now. I followed my heart, even though I vowed never to have a dog anymore. Life is not about what you want. That is my conclusion. If you follow what you want, there's always conflict, and you don't feel fulfilled, and my life is about what I need. And my need, I know what I need by following my heart. And when I saw that dog in the park, there was this strong urge to save him, to rescue him. It made me wake up early in the morning, and with this red backpack full of freshwater snacks and canned meat and so, I would go there and feed him and try to befriend him. And twice a day I would go there. And it made me feel alive again. After my previous dog died, and I just felt stuck. It really stimulated me again. It's spiritual, following your heart. Maybe it doesn't lead you to what you mentally think that you want, but it gives you what you need, and it is incredibly powerful. So I'm stuck again with 2 dogs now. They're so wonderful. Just amazing. Every day I'm grateful. I would never buy a dog from a shop or so, because that's so superficial. Many people who buy a dog from a shop, they see it as a toy. They then realize that it takes a lot of work to take care of, and then they dump them. It's so sad. But I wake up every morning feeling grateful that I have been able to make a difference, and that they are now happy and healthy, and probably wouldn't have been alive anymore if it were not for me. So that's what makes my heart beat. It's the same with relationships. You will come across somebody with whom you feel such a strong bond. It's karma that determines that. Then you go for it. Don't listen to other people's opinions. Don't think too much. Follow your feeling. That doesn't mean to be foolish or reckless, but follow your heart. And if it's not meant to be, it will be a very tumultuous period for a while, and you will learn enormous, valuable lessons for life from that situation. That is what happens when you follow your heart. You evolve, you grow enormously. So follow your heart. We'll talk about this later, because following your heart is one of the goals of yoga. There are people who say it's foolish. You have to control your mind and you have to have discipline and go to work every day and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you have to provide a living, but that's not what makes you happy. That's not what makes people happy. Anyway, we will come back to that later on. Questions? Further questions?
I noticed a lot of my yogic friends turn to veganism, to become vegans. I think it's very natural.
The reason not to eat meat anymore in yoga is because it means an animal has to be killed for your purpose. So it's a violation of the first principle. Many spiritual people will say, if you eat meat, it makes your mind restless, so it's difficult to meditate. That's not the reason. It's because you're complicit in the killing of an animal. Whether you buy it in the supermarket or whether you catch and kill the animal yourself, one way or another you're involved. Because that animal that you buy, that piece of meat that you buy in the supermarket is killed by somebody else for your sake. But there has to be some nuance here. I've been a vegetarian for 20 years or so. And I was not healthy. You can be vegetarian and healthy if you spend 3-4 hours a day preparing food and stuffs. Because if you want to be a vegetarian, you need to really take care of all the nutrients that your body needs to function properly. And many vegetarians lack vitamin B, and it's complex. And they lack certain amino acids. They have lots of certain amino, but then lacking others. So there's no balance there. When you lack vitamin B, it affects your brain and your nerve system. And it explains why many vegetarians are suffering from depression. Even though they do yoga, they don't drink, and they are vegetarian and what have you. I suffered a lot. So I started eating animal products again. Became a lot healthier because of that. Because I cannot spend 3-4. I love cooking. I hardly ever go out. I always cook. But I don't enjoy spending 3-4 hours in the kitchen preparing all these little thingies that you need to make a complete meal. So, like with everything else, the way that I present it is don't be radical, don't be fanatic, follow your feeling. I followed the path of vegetarianism for years and came to the conclusion, for me it doesn't work. Unless I can spend more time preparing foods in the kitchen. But I'm very conscious of what I do. And my dogs also, they eat meat. So I have to go to the butcher and buy 8 kilos of meat, put it in the freezer. And it hurts my heart to realize that there's about half a pig. But you know, that's life. I cannot make my dogs vegetarian because I'm a yoga teacher or something, or a yoga practitioner. Just use common sense. If you have the motivation to spend time preparing proper meals, researching and preparing and doing all the work, that would be ideal. I hope one day I find a partner that can do that for me, who's interested. But no, I'm just kidding. Follow your feeling. And if you don't feel so healthy anymore, you have to figure out why. And if that's a lack of nutrients, maybe you have to make an adjustment to your diet. You know, everything is okay. until you feel that it's not okay anymore. And then you have to be flexible enough to change it, not be rigid and inflexible and just stick to something just because it sounds like a nice proposition. All right, short break. Then we can start with asana.